many sights to see when I look in my window. So many different people to be that it's strange, so strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch. Oh, must be the season of the witch.
Hello there, everybody, Spidey fans alike. I am Madhog Master, and I am joined by the ever-elusive Ross Faries. Sure, Spider Fairies. Why not? I wasn't even a fan of Spider-Man before watching this film. I might be. I might be after this. Honestly, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films did not make me a fan. The original 1960s Spider-Man did not make me a fan. Amazingly, might I add. I grew up with that. 90s Spider-Man, shockable shock, did not make me a fan.
The animation was garbage.
It was, but to that cartoon's credit, it introduced me to the Kingpin.
Which is something that you kind of... it's helpful to know of before this movie, yes.
Yes, I am so glad that the Kingpin was introduced to me at an early age, relatively speaking. I did not even count the Sony's Amazing Spider-Man film, because I did not even bother watching them. But you might as well consider them part of this whole ordeal, because the only really amazing thing about those Amazing Spider-Man films is that the same company who greenlit them is also responsible for making Into the Spider-Verse possible in the first place. And for that,
no kidding.
Honestly, I could forgive them of anything after that. Short of genocide. Yes.
Okay, so I think we came into it from completely opposite ends, too.
Indeed.
So you seem to really want to see this movie before it came out just because of its artistic style alone.
Yes, indeed.
On the other hand, I was incredibly apathetic because of, number one, it was being produced by Sony, and Sony's track record with Spider-Man hasn't been great.
Exactly have the best tracking record with Sony and Spider-Man ever since Spider-Man 3 from the Sam Raimi era.
Correct. But the other part, and the more dubious part, was I have at least some tertiary knowledge of the comics that this came from, and I'm just looking at this like, wait, so you have not introduced Miles Morales at all into popular culture, and then you're trying to do the rest of the Spider-Verse? All in one movie? Oh god, that sounds like that's going to go awfully.
I completely understand that sentiment, mostly because it's not just your own sentiment. You are in the same boat as many critics before you. Given the premise, the very specific premise and concept behind this film, it seemed like a project doomed to fail. Like, say, a Batman vs. Superman crossover. Or, a rushed-out Suicide Squad or Justice League film, to give you completely random examples.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sony has been in a peculiar position ever since they shared custody of the character with Disney. That's a whole scene in its own right.
Oh, you didn't actually mention Spider-Man Homecoming. Did you actually see that film?
Oh, I've seen that film. I enjoyed it. It is fun, but disposable.
Correct. I was of a similar opinion. I was like, this is
Okay.
the best Spider-Man film so far, but I don't really feel that this is particularly super flattering to any Spider-Man fan.
Well,
I mean, Peter Parker is basically just basically like, I just want Iron Man to acknowledge me.
I'm fine with that. The problem with that film is that it's happening in an already established continuity. They had to shoehorn it into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The one significant advantage that Into the Spider-Verse has is that it doesn't really have to do that at all. It can create its own universe from the ground up, which it did, and best of all, they can stick it up to Disney because this is easily the best Spider-Man related anything to ever come out in any capacity in the history of forever.
Some of the comics can probably beat this. I can't remember any specific storylines that are better, but in any other medium besides the original, yes, I completely agree.
Okay, let me rephrase it. It is the best Spider-Man related anything to ever come out in any capacity that people will actually know about.
Fair enough.
You know what? I don't even care about sounding professional or criticizing this film like a professional would. I'm just going to drown and indulge myself in as many hyperboles as I can possibly muster. To me, Into the Spider-Verse is not only the best superhero film of all time, it is not only the best Spider-Man anything that ever was, it is also the best animated film in several years. And the reason for it is because it is literally something that could not have existed prior to Sony creating an entire new software for the specific purpose of making this film. Did you know that?
Very much I did not know that, but makes sense. It's basically the Avatar effect, only, with a movie whose plot is not complete garbage.
Oh, you're referring to James Cameron's
Avatar, yes.
Okay, well, let me actually validate that otherwise silly comment you just made by providing a similar yet completely different comparison.
Okay.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 1988.
I see where you're going here. Just the sheer amount of different art styles going together in one project and not clashing somehow.
Yes, the ability of the animators and all the people who worked in it to properly input these characters, these cartoon characters of different origins and different styles, different aesthetics, into a realistic environment that they inhabit and they properly interact with. They feel they are part of the world they inhabit, they don't just feel tacked on. The techniques used in Who Framed Roger Rabbit already existed and have existed for an unimaginably long time. I'm talking about the late 1910s, at the very least.
Correct.
They were never implemented in a film in such a manner. What was really new, what was really original and creative about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, directed by Robert Zemeckis, produced by Steven Spielberg, and the animation part directed specifically by Richard Williams, what was really new was how the technology and the techniques were implemented in its text. It felt like something that was never tried before, because it wasn't. It was and it wasn't, technically.
They hadn't gone on that scale before.
Yes, they haven't gone on a scale that by which the characters truly feel part of the world as opposed to just drawn on the film. If you look at any other classic examples of mixed technique films, such as, I don't know, Song of the South, it's the first thing that comes to mind, sadly. The various interactions between the live-action actors and the animated characters does not really work all that well. It felt like the actors were looking at an empty space, and it felt like the cartoons did not really leave an impact on the world they were supposed to be part of. That all changed with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where we had characters leaving shadows, being affected by the light and the illumination of a room, actually taking up real objects. All of that was accomplished in 1988, which is very impressive. It was before we started adopting CGI softwares.
Correct.
Now,
so that was almost all practical effects. I mean,
Yes.
there was still some computers used in the making of that movie for sure, but it was not
at all
what were expected.
Actually, not at all. I've seen a making of that film.
Really?
There was no computer CGI technology used in that whatsoever. It was just
really,
that
I was surprised
good.
they would at least use it for coloring because I know Disney had started to move over towards
No, I don't believe that's the case.
it. Fair
Anyway,
enough.
so going back to Into the Spider-Verse, we are at a similar threshold when it comes to doing something completely new, or that at the very least feels like completely new and original, utilizing techniques that already exist in the surprisingly eclectic realm of CGI animation. For example, the use of limited frames for CGI characters in order to emulate a more traditional style. You see how the characters move, they tend to not have a fluid motion, they tend to
Correct.
go on a 24 frames per second type of
Move
animation.
instead of a 60 frames per second
Yes,
type of...
in order to feel more traditional in that sense, in order to emulate a traditional animation. That particular technique is nothing new. It has been done countless times. Most of those times to complete disaster.
Correct.
Exactly, and this is my now seemingly obvious comparison with Who Framed Roger Rabbit and films that came before Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The only other time in which limited frame animation in that manner, in that scale, worked really well was in the Peanuts movie. They went
have not seen
out.
it myself,
You
but
should
okay.
watch that film. It's a marvel to behold. There was never something like the Peanuts movie before the Peanuts movie in that sense. Any other example I can think of a limited framed CGI animation comes from, unfortunately, TV budgeted animated series. Mostly anime.
Oh no.
And they never look good.
I did have some concerns when I first settled into the movie about the animation style, just because I noticed they put this kind of comic filter over everything, and I thought that might get obnoxious after a little while, but no, I actually really liked it in the end.
Yes, indeed. And I'll get to that in a moment, but a more recent example of that style being applied to animation was a show that came out in 2018, The Dragon Prince, on Netflix, which was made by the same people who worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender. It doesn't look good at all. In fact, losing several frames of animation as these characters move completely harms some of the more meaningful scenes. It's akin to watching a 60 frame per second video game recorded in 30 frames per second, so it's choppy gameplay footage. That's how it looks like. In the worst case scenario, that's how that animation, that style, might end up looking. Fortuitously, that is not the case with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But
No. Just don't spend the entire little podcast here talking just about the animation.
Well, I've only just begun. Funny you should say that. This is one of the most vibrant, colorful, anti-establishment animations I've seen in a long time. And when I say anti-establishment, I mean anti-Disney. That's what I really mean.
Yes.
I have been craving for an alternative to the oppressively polished Pixar/Disney style that has consumed the mainstream culture up until now. I have been looking for an alternative to that for so long. I have found it with Into the Spider-Verse. It is so aggressively in your face with its stylistic statement, its emboldened use of color, and hyper-stylized scenes and action sequences, all colliding into this magnificent, beautiful canvas, cinematic canvas, that takes its inspiration from comics as well as New York graffitis, and it never ever relents in that sense. As soon as you think you might have seen everything that this film has to offer, here's the climax of the film, and it's the trippiest, most gorgeous, eye-bleeding thing imaginable. It surprises you at every moment, at every scene, both the spectacular moments and the more nuanced moments, and even those little details that blink and you might miss. Such as the guy getting hit by a bagel in the background, and a big font appears on top of him that says "Bagel." That's a small detail, but one that I noticed. This entire film is drop-dead gorgeous, in a way that's so explicitly anti-artistic, in a way that goes against everything you thought you knew about mainstream animation, about CGI animation, about anything Disney or Pixar might put out year after year. And I still like those films, but it's nice to have something else to hold on to when it comes to your enjoyment of art. Imagine if the entire art movement of the 20th century was nothing but Picasso and no one else. Wouldn't that get tiring? We've had 20 plus years of nothing but Disney, Pixar, and plenty of imitators. This is something entirely new. This isn't just an alternative, in fact. This pretty much feels like the high-budget version of an artistic revolution. Here come the hyperboles. And in a way, so was Avatar by James Cameron. I can hear your yells of disapproval. Going back to the silly comment you made earlier, which I am in the process of validating right now, at the time, Avatar was so impressive not because it made anything new, but because it used available technology to make something that felt new, at least from a visual standpoint, that is. And so is the case with Into the Spider-Verse, the next evolution of the current available technology and animation. That is precisely what it feels like to me. That's what pretty much everyone says it is, and I agree with everyone for a change.
Which is odd, because you usually don't.
I pride myself as a pretentious hipster sometimes. The story and the characters are great too, which helps.
I mean, yeah, you haven't really even touched upon the story besides, they're great.
I really like the message about everybody can be Spider-Man, which is subtextually about validation and representation, and I like that on a metatextual standpoint, because to have this film, they had to create something completely new, a software that's completely new in that sense. So it's a film that is literally something completely new, and it's about representation, validation, self-validation, and what it takes to be a good person.
Also something that I have been musing on, especially the second time through the film, because I've seen it twice at this point. I think the filmmakers, on some capacity, knew that there were very little expectations upon them, because I literally have Miles's graffiti say "no expectations." I think that's not only a matter of the character for his growth, but also kind of maybe a mantra that they were flying around in the office behind the scenes, too.
Well, let's not mince words. Nothing about this film can be considered typical in the realm of animated films released theatrically nowadays. It's a bold statement against the status quo. made even bolder by the fact that, again, they had to create a completely new software, and it stars Miles Morales. And the thesis statement of the film is that anybody can be Spider-Man because anybody can be a hero, which also means anybody can be what they want to be. Representation, my friend.
Yes, very nice. Again, my greatest fear was that this was basically Miles Morales' debut in the public consciousness. I mean, he got on the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon. He was at least somewhat in the recent PS4 game, but this is basically like his like mass market debut, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think they just hit out of the park. And I was afraid they were going to lose focus on him, too, just by all the characters that they decided to introduce.
What they ended up doing was not only give a fantastic solo origin story for Miles Morales, but creating a new universe of potential sequels and spin-offs in the process, which is what DC would have wanted so bad.
It's what Sony wanted so bad with the Amazing Spider-Man movie,
yes,
too.
But they nailed it with this one film because they let the good, creative people actually make it.
Oh, they nailed it far more than you even realize. So, this movie had a budget of $80 million, which is relatively small, but for a film of
considering
this
how it looks, that's absolutely nuts and impressive. How much has it made so far?
$275 million.
Yes!
Sony has already confirmed that there's a sequel and a spin-off in the works.
Yes!
I have just made your night.
I'm so happy you made my year in advance. It's especially impressive if you consider that a typical Disney or Pixar film is budgeted for around $300 million. You mean to tell me that with just $80 million they managed to pull off the best looking animated film in the past decade or so?
Mm-hmm.
Geniuses.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to marry them all in a polyamorous relationship.
The movie has already won a Golden Globe.
Sure, whatever. But the fact that it made money, that's the important thing.
Exactly. That means that Sony is going to make more of them.
Yes. Yes.
That's what really counts.
Yes.
But it also is important in a couple of facets. First, this is really the first time they tried to make a mass market Spider-Man film that was actually aimed at all ages. There was a lot of camp in the first couple Sam Raimi films, sure, but they would definitely scoot towards a mildly older audience.
Yes.
This is a movie that you could take your 6-year-old to, and you could see yourself, and both come out having a freaking blast. It has the type of all ages appeal that I think Spider-Man as a character and as a just as an entity plays best with. You don't really need to make this dark or gritty in any capacity. The underlying things that make Spider-Man, in contrast specifically, Miles Morales' story still follows a lot of the same beats as Peter Parker's, only the direction.
All the Spider people have that in common. They're all driven by guilt.
Correct.
The guilt for the death of a loved one, which pushes them to take on the mantle and the responsibility that comes with superherohood, which also is a metaphor for growing up and accepting the responsibilities of growing up, the burden that comes with it. It's the same story told 5 different times, come to think of it, but it's slightly different every time due to personalities and behaviors and the environment by which they come from. Spider-Ham.
And also specifically the fact that they don't linger on it too. People know how Spider-Man got his powers at this point. They don't really feel that they need to linger on any type of origin, so they knock it out of the way really quickly on all of them, but in an effective way too.
Yes. They are revealed through their own personalized comic books. Yes, let's speak about the individual Spider people in this film.
Sure.
Because, again, it gives me the chance to go back to, once again, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because you have all of these characters animated in their own specific, different, diversified style and aesthetic, and they're all smoothly coexisting in the same environment, in the same universe, leaving an impact, shadows, being affected by light, all these neat little details that you might not notice on a first viewing because everything is moving real fast.
I would say that's at a breakneck pace, but it's at a brisk pace. It knows when to linger on important moments,
It does.
but on the other hand, it knows when to keep up the pace as well.
Yes.
But generally speaking, most of the pace is very, very brisk, and that's to its benefit, because if it didn't have the type of pacing that it does, it would have completely fallen apart.
When the worst criticism I can give a film is that I wish there was more of it so that I could spend more time with these characters and know a little bit more about them, you know you have a classic on your hands. By the way, yes, that would be my biggest criticism of this film. I wanted more. I want so much more of this.
That's basically how I walked out of the theater the first time I saw it. The second time I was actually trying to look for more things to maybe kind of nitpick, because I was like, okay, no film is perfect. Okay, let's like actually seriously look at this one. I was just
well,
like,
if you
I
really
only
want to
found-
see something to nitpick, then maybe you can point out the weirdness regarding how Gwen Stacy actually ended up in Miles's world, because apparently she didn't just get to it when the inciting incident happens. She also went back in time, which explains why Morales met her before the actual inciting incident occurs. But I don't think they ever explained that, or maybe they did, but it was moving so fast that I missed it.
But they mentioned it very briefly in her comic origin story. You also have to keep in mind that we watched two different versions of the film. Remember, you had the Italian localized one. So I'm watching basically it completely as intended. So I couldn't say, you know, maybe they dropped a line in your dub or something.
It could be the case, but honestly, the greatness of this film is so universally truthful that even the dub, even me suffering through the Italian dub, could not halt its momentum.
I mean, come on, you lost Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir.
I know, that pisses me off in ways you cannot even imagine. But what pisses me off even more is this little but really nice detail. I've been looking up about the very specific kind of voice work that was involved in the making of this film, and apparently Miles's Spanish accent when he speaks Spanish and his mother's Spanish accent are slightly different in inflection and pronunciation. That is so important. That is such an important yet small detail that of course I cannot get if it's dubbed over. You know?
Yes. I mean, you'll have your chance to watch the English version at some point, I'm sure. I mean, they'll probably
I'll pirate it if I have to.
I'm sure they'll release some kind of like DVD or Blu-ray in your region that will have the English voice track intact.
I really, really love this film in spite of the Italian localization, which is one of the best praises you can give to a film. It's so good that it supersedes the mediocrity of a given localization, which is an inevitable wall that one has to overcome if they hope to watch a film in theaters nowadays. And they are not, say, in Anglo-Saxon countries.
Okay, so something I have to say, my most major nitpick, and that's all it is a complete nitpick. I think they went a little too far with Kingpin, with his appearance.
But I love the fact that he looks like two refrigerators glued together.
There's this point where he gets out of a limo, and you're just like, How the heck did you even get into that?
How the heck are you able to move, you should be asking. But I love that! It is the most comic book form for a comic book villain, honestly. And you know what?
Again, I realize that's a nitpicking. It's one that I had that a lot of people didn't share. In fact, some
But
people
I understand
really
why
loved it.
you would have that nitpick, because any other human has somewhat realistic shape.
So he's the only one with that type of exaggerated anatomy to him. So that just...
But I love it. I love it. It's like, it's a walking sofa. A two-story sofa.
On the other hand, I think he makes a fantastic villain for the film.
Okay, here are my top 3 reasons why I'm so happy that Kingpin is the main villain in a Spider-Man film.
Go!
Number 1. Is named Kingpin, not Wilson Fisk, even though it's technically his real name, but is the Kingpin, damn it. I know him as the Kingpin, he will forever be the Kingpin. Number 2, he looks like IKEA furniture coming to life, which makes his appearance striking. Number 3, he is the weirdest villain in the Marvel universe, and you know why? For a very specific reason. If you look at every single character, every single villain in Marvel, they all have origin stories. They all have established reasons as to why they ended up having powers. Kingpin is just a really super strong man, and that's about it. There is no reason whatsoever why he's as strong as the Thing, but he can take on Spider-Man mano a mano and can basically throw cars at people. There is no reason for that. He just can.
Yeah, that was an exaggeration on the movie's part. Basically, Wilson
he's
Fisk
really
is
very strong.
Yeah, he is. Basically, all that fat's supposed to be muscle, but he's basically supposed to have, like, peak human level strength. But whatever, that's incredibly nitpicky nonsense.
But I love it, because he has working under him criminals like Tombstone and Prowler and Norman Osborn as a literal giant goblin with wings.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. Like, everything
And
else, I was
Scorpion.
like, okay, that all of them apparently came from, like, Miles Morales' like comic universe that was introduced in the Ultimates universe from Marvel.
That explains why the Green Goblin is a literal Green Goblin.
Okay.
Well, in fairness, he's in that film for a very brief moment, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But I love the idea that all of these villains, including female Dr. Octopus, which was awesome, by the way.
Yes.
More of
that was
that,
a great
please.
reveal. Like, no one fucking saw that coming.
Yeah, that was awesome. I don't use the word awesome often because it's an overused word and I hate it, but that was awesome, and I am drowning in hyperboles, and I don't care. And they're all working for this mass of humanity that's strong because of no particular reason. It just is, and he has money, and I love it because it's just like 90s Spider-Man.
Okay, but we got off track here.
Have we now?
Okay.
Have we gotten off track, or are we just on the right track all along?
So you have Miles Morales, Peter B. Parker, Gwen Stacy all share the same art. Very realistic style. It matches with the rest of the film in the same type of art style.
Yes.
Also,
then?
I think it's very bold for them to actually... I mean, it's consistent with Miles' origin story. Actually, in the comics, Miles Morales never met Peter Parker, but killing off that universe's Peter Parker, like, immediately, still strikes me as a bold move.
It was a bold move, especially in a Spider-Man film, to kill Spider-Man. Spoilers, by the way! This film has been out for a while. I think we can openly address spoilers if it's necessary.
That also happens within, like, the first 15 minutes of the film, so,
yes.
I mean, it's not that big a spoiler.
Well, it's pretty big a spoiler because the trailer doesn't spoil it, for a change.
Yeah, but what I do love about it is, you know, you actually see kind of New York grieving for Spider-Man, which I didn't expect them to actually go that angle.
I mean, they should have.
I mean, they should have. Like, the only thing that was missing was kind of J. Jonah Jameson being like,
oh. In fairness, we do get a brief cameo by J. Jonah Jameson in that post-credit scene, which might be the best part of the entire film. It's the greatest thing that ever happened. Let's just say that a certain famous Spider-Man meme has gone full circle. And I am so happy. I could not have left that theater in the most glad mood. If Spider-Man himself had come out of the screen and said to me, "Hey kid, we're getting a Spider-Ham movie, are you happy?"
I hope it's not a Spider-Man movie that they're going to spin off. Like, honestly...
A Spider-Ham, you mean?
Yeah, Spider-Ham.
But Spider-Ham is the best. I want my Tex Avery Porky Pig Spider-Man cartoon, damn it.
Please don't. I mean, I wouldn't mind if you made like a spin-off cartoon with him, I guess. But, I mean, please.
He has to team up with Noir Spider-Man.
No.
Yes.
Okay, anyway, so we haven't actually mentioned the art styles here. So basically the three contrasting art styles to this are Penny Parker's... I don't know any other way to call it than just Penny Parker or Spider-Mac. I don't know. Then you have Peter Porker or Spider-Ham. And then you
Porker
have Spider-Man.
Is genius.
Then you have Spider-Man Noir.
Yes, who punches Nazis.
Penny Parker is basically super kawaii anime. I mean,
Yes.
that's not necessarily consistent with a comic book, but I don't mind it here.
What I really like about Penny Parker, since we are concentrating on her, is that from a design standpoint, her and her mecha, they look like the quintessential parody of an anime girl, right?
They really do, yes.
And yet, she still has so much depth as a character in ways that are so subtle you might miss them. The very way she interacts with her own environment when she's inside the cockpit of a robot, moving around, activating levers and commands and eating snacks and all of that, doing several things at once. There is so much character coming out of those particular moments. And where a robot dies, oh, it is such a sad moment, actually. Even though
I don't know if it's entirely
don't
earned,
really
but...
know much about her and her robot. Hence why I want to see a film or at least a spin-off show starring Penny Parker, because I feel that the idea of a Spider-Mac piloted by a little girl like that, it's pretty much the most Japanese thing imaginable.
She also has the most unique power set out of all of the characters, too. I mean, her only actual power is that she communicates telepathically with the radioactive spider that bit her.
She pilots a mecha, which, you know, in Japan, that's the greatest superpower, essentially.
Yes. So, yeah, I actually would be completely on board with a spin-off of Penny Parker. I don't think that's what we're going to get. I'm almost certain if they're going to do a spin-off, it's going to be Spider-Gwen.
I am even more in for that!
I would put money on it at this point that they're going to just focus on any one character from that. It's Spider-Gwen, because she's so likable. It's not just likable, but she's so hot in the comic scene right now. And
yes, and really also she's had a bit of a rub already in some Disney's animated specials of Marvel superheroes.
Well, she's running around with Squirrel Girl. How could I not love it?
Yes, of course you do. And don't forget Miss Marvel. Yeah, those are the official... come on, Miss Marvel is the best. Shut up.
Come on, you have Spider-Man, and Spider-Gwen, and Squirrel Girl in there. I don't care who else is there.
Knowing you, that's fair enough. But regardless, I do believe that Spider-Gwen, or was it also Spider-Ghost? Ghost Spider.
The Ghost Spider is sometimes what she's referred to as, just to differentiate her from the pre-existing Spider-Woman or Spider-Girl.
She has one of the best, if not the best, designed superhero costume I've seen in a long time. Really, the only other one that can compare to that is Miles Morales' costume, I was about to say. In fact.
Well, at least we're on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm. You have Spider-Noir, which is voiced by Nicolas Cage, and I missed out on that in the dub, unfortunately. But still, it's such a great concept. It's a completely black and white entity. He stays consistently black and white, even in a colorful world, and he still manages not to look out of place, which is so impressive.
And they have like one of the best running gags with him too, the Rubik's Cube.
Yes, the Rubik's Cube. I guess it was okay.
It's just like a black and white person trying to figure out how a Rubik's Cube works. They had a moment in the movie where he was just asking Spider-Pig, so is this purple? No. Is this purple? No.
I personally like very much Spider-Ham. He was clearly supposed to be the obvious zany comic relief character, given the fact that he's a literal cartoon character, a literal old-school Looney Tunes, Tex Averian cartoon character that uses cartoon shenanigans to defeat bad guys.
Yes.
But even he has his own quiet and more emotional moments. Even he has his great character moments. And my favorite one is also the one in which he says to Scorpion, "You got a problem with cartoons?" And that proceeds to annihilate him with cartoon mullets. I love it. You know, that's so validating to me, specifically.
He also gets probably the single best like one-liner in the entire.
That's all, folks.
Too. No, I wasn't referring to that one. It's when they were in Miles's room and hiding from his roommate. It's like, hey, do animals talk in your world? I don't want to freak them out.
So that scene, right? The scene in which they try to hide from his roommate. It's a great scene in its own right because it showcases
all the different art styles just kind of meshed together in one place.
Yes, perfectly smoothly interacting with each other as a unit, even though they were individually animated by different people. They all had to collaborate to make sure that the movement overall and the individual movement of these characters would be in sync. That's great and all. Although, actually, maybe this is my biggest criticism. The placement of that scene, of that very funny scene, doesn't feel appropriate considering what the tone was at the time, the personal tragedy that Miles went through. It didn't seem appropriate to have that scene right at that moment.
I think that was entirely why it was there, just to kind of give the audience a break from the just a very brief reprieve from the serious tone that was going for at that time. I mean, I understand why they placed it there.
Yes, I understand it as well, but I think it's not
very serious
good.
Scene.
I think it's not a good placement regardless.
They knew it was still kind of a kids' movie, so they wanted to at least, have something to kind of keep the kids engaged while they tried to elaborate on this more serious plot.
Well, I don't know about that.
I think that was the thought process in that place.
Well, I don't know about that because Pixar has no problem making kids and adults cry for 20 minutes before switching to light-hearted moods. That one scene from Inside Out comes to mind. So yes, I don't think that's a valid excuse for doing that. But that is my only criticism, really. It's not even that big of a deal.
Yeah, keep in mind that we had to dig for that.
Yes, this film looks great. These characters are great to interact with, to watch in action. The action scenes are spectacular and so well animated, well choreographed. The music, I want the entire soundtrack of this film become the soundtrack of my existing life. This film
definitely helps with the whole counterculture feel that it's going
it feels
for.
so entrenched in the moment by which this film comes out. It captures the taste and the feelings and the preoccupations of the current generation that this film is aimed towards. This feels like a film made by young-minded people for actually young people and adults alike. It feels countercultural, even though technically it isn't because of its place of origin. But hey, if you can craft a fantastic opus like the Lego Movie, if you can craft something masterful like the Lego Movie out of literal product placement, then you can do anything. And yes, it is made by the same people, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It explains why it's animated in a very similar style. They also have a limited frame animation going on there, and it makes the film look like it's stop motion animation.
Yes. Oh, yes, I've seen the Lego movie. I think it came out very well considering what it was, but I think this still blows it out of the water.
Yes, this blows almost everything else out of the water, which is not saying much because almost nothing can compare to this one. In many ways, it is so good. Hyperboles, remember? I said at the beginning I would use as many hyperboles as I can master. I don't care about sounding sane right now or professional. When I love something, I want to express that love in such an emphatic manner, much like how this film expresses its own love for itself and its sources.
I mean,
the
other thing I will say that we haven't really touched upon is, again, this is a movie with great action, fantastic comedy.
Yes.
A killer soundtrack. I would almost say bleeding edge visuals.
You cannot have bleeding edge if you don't first have cutting edge.
Correct.
Oh,
anyway, but it surprisingly has a lot of heart to it, too.
Oh, yes. It could have easily been comedy, it could have easily been parody, and it is very funny at times, but it has a very heartfelt story in the middle of it, and it works against all odds. It's great.
Yes. I will say that I think how they handle Miles's tragedy is far more resonant than any attempt at Peter Parker's.
Well, I don't know, Uncle Ben's death in the first Spider-Man film by Sam Raimi was pretty effective in its own right. Perhaps it is fair to say that at the time we might not have been of the right age to enjoy that version of Spider-Man.
Maybe. I think the way it's handled here is far more effective. I'm sorry.
I'd say it's effective because you have a subversion of expectations regarding his one relative that you expect to die, but then there is another subversion of expectations in which that one relative actually dies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a subversion that brings us back to the default settings, in a way. That was clever.
They somehow fit all this in 2 hours.
It felt even shorter.
And that's good, because you want more of it. But on
Yes!
the other hand, when you're thinking about how much you went through, you can't believe that was only 2 hours worth of content. Like,
yes, it feels like material large enough for 2 films.
At least, if not like a small series.
Yes, that too, and yet they fit perfectly in 2 hours. Now, sure, they had to go on a very brisk pace, but it worked for this film.
Exactly. Like I said, that's why I said this film would have fell apart if its pacing was any different.
And like I said, it's bombastic and loud in its presentation and aesthetics, but beneath it, there is a subtlety and nuance that you cannot quite catch on a first viewing. There is so much attention to details. The way Miles's spidery thoughts spiral out of control in the form of lettering, comic book lettering. That's brilliant. And that happens throughout his entire spider journey, so to speak.
That's another thing I really want to go on. It's something that this film does that's very, very smart. That almost seems like a no-brainer, but no other Spider-Man origin story I've seen actually does this. Him not understanding how to use his powers.
Well, as Peter B. Parker would put it, you just have to have a leap of faith.
Correct, but like, for example, him not figuring out how to unstick from things. It's very natural, leads to very good gags, and you can completely understand. If you suddenly had spider powers tomorrow, you'd probably not be able to figure out how they work properly, too.
Yes. Ross?
Yes?
Hey. I am the master of comedic timing. Oh. Okay. Yes, I guess that summarizes it.
Oh, you got me with that one. Really good.
I knew I would.
He's just so good. I just...
Yes, gush away. It is.
I,
I know.
it's hard to even elaborate on how good it is. Like I've done like a 20-minute video as a review of it,
Ross,
just airing out all of my thoughts. But like,
I mean, Ross, you know me. You know how I love elaborating on my thoughts in a way that makes me sound smart, right? Even I had struggled to find the proper dictionary compulsion to manifest my feelings for this film without coming across as some baby nerd or something. Like that 14-year-old kid that watched Dragon Ball for the very first time. That's how I feel after watching Into the Spider-Verse. It's one of those modern masterpieces that feels like it changes everything. It makes you feel like upon seeing it, you become part of a new zeitgeist in popular culture. It's an event, an artistic event. It's like, I don't know, watching Star Wars in 1977?
Time will tell, but it didn't do badly for itself to begin with.
No, that's good.
Sure.
I mean,
like normally when you see a film like this is the type of film that you would almost cringe if no one else saw. The mindset I was going into it. In fact, I had to hear a couple reviews saying like, no, it's really good. I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. Before I felt confident enough to actually go and see it. I think that's kind of why it didn't do as well on its opening weekend versus its subsequent weekends, because the word kind of had to get out there about it.
I think people might have a prejudice against animated features that are not Disney, Pixar, or DreamWorks.
I think also to a point that many people just kind of burnt out on Spider-Man origin stories.
Yes,
that
well,
might be it.
You know what people are not burnt out on?
Spider-Pig?
Yes, also that, but good, vital representation. Hey, guess which film was very successful last year?
Actually, it was this year, Black Panther.
Yes.
It was early this year, but yes. That one just did gangbusters and no one expected it.
People are starved for representation in mainstream media. People are starved to see more than just the typical white savior narrative. People are starved for characters like Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy. And yes, maybe even Spider-Ham. I know I am! I want my cartoon pig representation, damn it!
Honestly, if I had to make any wagers on the sequel, expect a lot of Spider-Man 2099.
Oh, you mean that one that was showcased right at the very end?
Yes, because it was actually a huge part of the actual Spider-Verse narrative in the comics, and he didn't actually show up in this film's narrative, so...
No, but he showed up to interact with 60s Spider-Man in the best gag and moment in the entire film. And that's also the moment where J. Jonah Jameson appeared. And you know what? I was going to give a 9 out of 10 to this film, but with J. Jonah Jameson showing up for 2 seconds, it just makes it to a 10 out of 10. I mean, there is no real true Spider-Man without J. Jonah Jameson. Thank you very much. I love J.
That was
Jonah
easily
Jameson.
the best part about the Sam Raimi films. That's
Yes.
for sure. Perfect J. Jonah Jameson. Like,
yes.
there was no way you could have done that better in live action. I'm sorry.
You're serious? I want Spider-Man! Yes, I love him.
So many good things about this film.
So many good things. The music, the action scenes, the use of color, ingenious use of color, animation, hyper-stylized aesthetics, comic book and graffiti alike inspiring and informing said aesthetic. Countercultural at its core, but distributed by a mainstream outlet.
And
Which
this
is
came from
such a
fucking
bizarre...
Sony.
Yes, it is such a bizarre turn of events. Sony is now, completely by accident, the leader of the countercultural anti-Disney movement with this one film. What a time to be alive. Speaking of which, there's going to be a Space Jam 2, apparently. So that's going to be interesting, at the very least.
How have to see it to believe it. I'm going to be kind of I'm going to be on the apprehensive side on that.
You can only go up after the first Space Jam, rationally speaking.
Oh, true. I mean,
it has great nostalgic value, mind you, but it's still very much trash.
true.
I just want to know how a Space Jam made in 2012 or whenever it comes out will look like. Because
2012, so it came out in the past?
What?
You said 2012, so it came out in the past somehow?
Oh, I meant to say 2020. 2020, okay? I am not used in saying it American style. I usually say it in the proper way, which is 2020, not 2020. Like hindsight. If Spider-Man looks and feels like this in 2018, I can only imagine what a Space Jam made in 2020 will look like.
I hope this is the type of movie that gets everyone's attention, especially in the industry.
It's already making big waves, so something has started moving, at the very least.
That's good. Now, basically, this is the type of thing this really kind of needs right now, as you've been elaborating.
We needed it so bad! Oh my gosh, this is so needed! Oh, please. I don't want a fourth Toy Story. I do want a Detective Pikachu, though, oddly enough. I'm very curious about that one.
I am too, honestly.
But anyway, so this is
Don't Sonic the Hedgehog. Please, God, no.
Well, you know what?
Please, God, no.
Listen, at the very least, that's got to be interesting, right? Even if it's a complete train wreck. It has Jim Carrey as Dr. Eggman.
I can kind of see it, though.
It's going to be fascinating, at the very least, right? And who knows, maybe they'll pull out a surprise. It's not going to be the worst thing Sonic has ever been part of. Well, anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been a review, gushing, of a film we adore at a fundamental level.
It's still settling in, but this is easily one of my favorite movies of all time at this point, and it just may take the #1 spot.
Wow. Well, then again, you don't watch many films, Ross.
No, I don't watch a huge number of films. I digress, but
yes.
Well, I was currently occupied by Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for reference.
Scott Pilgrim was very fine at the time, but I want to stress at the time.
This film is Scott Pilgrim's art style fully realized.
But anyway, this has been Madhog Master, and I have been joined by Ross Faries. Where can people find you, Ross?
Oh, my YouTube channel, Fanboy Fairies.
Anywhere else?
I also stream on twitch.tv/fanboyfairies.
Yes, and you have a Twitter.
Oh yes, I have a Facebook and a Twitter. Twitter is Paradise Fairies, and the Facebook page is Paradise and Fairies. Nah.
That's very easy to remember. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Adriano Bordoni1. I have a Patreon. If you want to donate, you will not, but I'm going to give you the link anyway. Patreon.com/Madhog. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel, or rather the YouTube channel in which this audio file will go on as a video, because I'm going to produce a audio file separated from the video, which you can listen to on my Patreon. But anyway, the video version of this review will go out on my YouTube channel, Madhog Master, which most likely is where most people will listen to it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the little notification bell to receive updates. I did not do all of this necessary tirade the last time I recorded a podcast, so I'm going to try and make an habit of doing so every time. Hallelujah. I don't really want to, but who am I kidding?
In the YouTube game, occasionally you have to.
Well, yes. Once again, this has been Dramatis Sermo, featuring me, myself and I, and also Ross Faries, Spider Faries, somewhere along the lines. Watch Into the Spider-Verse. It's a modern times masterpiece. I believe it's already changing lives. In the words, the immortal words of the last and best Stan Lee cameo in a film, the Spider-Man mask fits all.
Mm-hmm.
No refunds.